I was wondering, as I was preparing or thinking about this interview, um, about the questions you asked, and I got stuck on the question about, when did you make a choice on, or how did you come to make the choice to be part of the struggle? And I realized I can't answer that question because I don't think one makes such a choice. So I come from a family of activists, both from my mother's side and my father's side, and my grandfather's side. So I was born into activism and struggle, and all my role models around me were people who were working and serving community. So I was brought up with this idea that it is expected that you serve. So my earliest memories as a little girl was that at home, um, we'd always have these people who'd come and stay over because I grew up in Pretoria. And those would be delegations of poor people coming from rural areas and the outskirts, like, the depths of KwaZulu Natal or the Eastern Cape. And it took me some time to understand that these people were coming to visit relatives on death row or coming for the final time when the person would be hanged. And on those times, they would stay at my home. So, I was surrounded by this until I could understand it, and understood that even though they were not like the events of like June 16 at a particular time, that constantly struggle was going on and people were being lost. Um, my father was a medical doctor in our community, and he served a lot of families of people who either were exiled or were serving in the underground and all of that. Although, that was not overt work, but I would remember, like, for example, one of the huge occasions where in the township where I grew up in Atteridgeville was the killing of a 3-year-old child while she was playing in her yard. Her name was Mita Ngubeni. And the soldiers were there driving around in their Caspers and all of that. And some kind of altercation happened outside her yard and she was playing. And the soldiers got out and they were shooting and they shot her. And one of these young guys, who was a young activist in the community, he was so furious at what it does. And so, almost on reflex, he reached out into the Casbah because the soldiers were out there and took out the key and ran with it. But he was shot. And, my father and my father treated him and I was assisting and all of that. So I was always surrounded by these things that were going on. In the early 80s, there would be raids. The Caspers would be going around, they would go into people's homes and beat up, especially young men. Um, and so my father's surgery, which was actually not really functional anymore because the soldiers would park outside, then people would be intimidated. Ended up the people who would not be scared of being ostracized, who would come there, would be these people who'd been beaten up. So we spent a whole lot of time servicing people who'd been beaten up by the cops and all of that, rather than patients, because people would be so scared of consulting my father's practice and all of that. So I think I was born into it. And then finally, when I went into university, that's when I really started activism in my own right as a young student in Azaso, um, uh, at Wits, and um, my major interest, and I was really blessed, was in women's struggle and women's rights. So I got to work with, um, I'm wearing a Fetro t-shirt. I used to be in Fetro. I'm not sure you're going to see it, so I'm going to move back a bit. Um, so this t-shirt has got, I don't know if you can see Mama Sisulu.
I can see it. I can see it. That's beautiful. Wow. Yes.
Uh, that's one of the t-shirts we made. So I was a student rep at um, at at VES, representing Azaso in the Transvaal. And as that, I served in the Federation of Transvaal Women. And those were like really heady times because it was coming up to the first and the second state of emergencies. I was working with like some of the most amazing women like Mama Sisulu, Mama Bart, um, June Mlangeni, Jessie Duarte, Firoza Adam. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. We were called Mama Sisulu's girls, and, it was absolutely fantastic. That activism, because we were working with women in Uwo, in the Western Cape. People like Barbara Schreiner then were at in the Western Cape and all of that. We were working with Craig's Governor and all of them in NOW, the Natal Organization of Women, and so forth. And we would come together as this regional women's organization, stroke leadership, and organize activities. And when I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking that even at that time, the level of repression and state brutality was so high that even organizing Women's Day and honoring it was such an act of resistance, um, especially in the time of the state of emergency. And we could use platforms like Wits University, which was somehow protected because of the privileged nature of that space, to bring people who come from different spaces to celebrate Women's Day and actually highlight it. Um, and I mean, it took a lot for women to come from Limpopo and very difficult areas, and to assert themselves in the way they did. And I think that the women's movement, particularly, was so strong in those mid 80s going forward. I think it was at its most impressive because, you know, even at the level of the state of emergency, we would have activities. We celebrated Women's Day in 1986. And people like Bo Auntie Bibi, Bo Mama Vesta Brown, and all of these women came. And Jessie Duarte and Firoza actually slept at my house, and so she was already in Pretoria and all of that. Jessie Duarte, Mama Sisulu, and that delegation of the leadership were coming from Johannesburg on the morning of the 9th, which was a Saturday. and the whole Pretoria was barricaded, and there were like those wire things and all of that, all the way between the union buildings and where we were supposed to start, which was the church in Andrew Street, the Methodist Church in Andrew Street. And basically, Jesse and them um, could not come into Atteridgeville, could not come into Pretoria because near the fountains at the entrance of Pretoria, they they were really they were coming with the peace staff, and we were going to put the peace staff at the union buildings, right? This was like 20 years after the first women's thing, so it was a major commemoration. And the police arrested the peace staff and Moses, JC, and all of them, and they were made to turn back, and they couldn't come to the march. But women were so innovative that different sets of women found ways of going around the various barricades, and it ended up at the union building. And there were hysterical things because the police were chasing the women and everything. Uh, Women were sitting in the gardens pretending that they were just coming for a stroll and a sad thing, and then they would march over in a clump and everything. Uh, Auntie Bibi and them, they had their delegation, and the police spotted them and everything. But they had loud hailers and all of that. So I was sitting, and poor me was thrown with loud hailers, and they ran off like very innocent, nice aunties from Lens and all of that. So, but but I think I miss that sense of the women coming together from very different experiences and really sharing and contributing and respecting each other. I think that sense of struggle and community is not there anymore, and it's one of the things that I really do miss.